Do you prefer to teach kids over adults?
I wouldn't. So
Yeah.
I have more experience teaching kids than I do adults.
That's fair.
I've only been teaching adults consistently for about 2 years now, and I teach them at the Barrington School. So I have a class there, and the big thing that I was always told is like, Craig looked at me in the adult class and I loved it. So I kind of took the philosophy of like, adults go through enough on their day-to-day basis.
Hello, welcome. You're listening or watching to the next episode of Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio. And today I'm joined by Noah Dever. Noah, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Great to have you here. Before we get going, I just wanted to make sure to let everybody know about all of the things that Whistlekick does, because this podcast is but one small piece in the large Whistlekick cog. And if you go to whistlekick.com, you can find out all of the things that we do and get involved with some of our in-person events, whether it's Martial Summit in New England, whether it's our multiple free training days throughout the country, or all-in weekend, or maybe you want to buy some merchandise, which if you use the code podcast15, you'll save yourself 15%. But maybe you want to buy a book. Maybe you want to buy a training program. Maybe you want to get faster or stronger or more flexible. All of that stuff can be found at whistlekick.com. If you are interested in this show specifically, you can go to whistlekickmartialartsradio.com and find out all the episodes that we've done. We've done so many episodes that I guarantee you will find one that you will enjoy of a guest you probably know. So head on over there and check out all it is that we do. But today, Noah, we're here to talk about you. So life is going good today?
Yeah, life is good. Just
awesome. So we have a bit of a knowledge of each other. We've gotten together. We've trained together. And I thought this would be fun to sit down with you and talk about your journey and figure out how you got involved in martial arts in the first place.
Yeah, no, it's fun. This is my first time being here. So, how I got started. So I'm currently 26. I started when I can't remember if it was 5.5 or 6, somewhere in there. Basically, my dad grew up doing martial arts for a while when he grew up in Boston. My mom has no experience in the martial arts. And I, as a kindergarten kid, was obsessed with Power Rangers growing up. So I looked at my mom and I said, I'm going to do that. And she said, oh no, absolutely not. Because one of the things with me growing up, and one of the things my mom was worried about, is I run pretty high on the anxiety scale, and that as a child, not knowing how to like talk about those things, it manifested as a lot of anger. And so my mom was like, I'm going to put this 5.5, 6-year-old in martial arts, teach him how to punch and kick and not know what to do with his emotions. And this is going to be an absolute disaster. And my dad was the one who went, no, like this was actually really good for me as a kid. It like gave me the discipline and the things that I needed for my life. And so they brought me, I'm from Exeter. So people at home probably know Craig Wareham, and John English also did an episode. They brought me to Karate International in Exeter. We were in an old industrial warehouse at the time, and Mr. English took me under his wing, and I've been here ever since, basically. Yeah.
Now, how much of your father's influence do you think was there in your also? I mean, I know you mentioned Power Rangers, but if your dad trained as well, was there any sort of connection there too?
So not at first. My dad wasn't in martial arts, but so I'm the oldest of 5. So there are 7 people in my family. And the cool thing is once I got in, everybody got in. We always joked with John and Craig growing up that my family was putting up rent for a hot second, because all 4 of my siblings took karate with me. And then on top of that, my parents got into it. My mom has a blue belt in karate and a yellow or a green belt in Yoshitsune combat jiu-jitsu. And my dad was a brown belt in both. So it was one of those things where I still poke fun at them. And I'm like, so when am I getting another Dever black belt up in here? Like, when are you coming to my class? And those kind of things. So not really at first, but my dad is also a police officer or a federal agent. So my dad and I talk a whole lot about different martial arts aspects because he gets a completely different viewpoint into martial arts than I have ever experienced because he's had to actually use martial arts and whatnot. So it's kind of interesting.
And what was it like having your siblings training with you? I know instances where it's gone either way. Can you talk a little bit about training with your siblings?
So it's been hit or miss. My sister, so far right now, there's only two of us that have gotten our adult black belt. At our school, I think the philosophy is that in order to get your adult black belt, you need to be mentally, physically, and emotionally ready. And we just don't think teenagers and kids have that capability. So most of the time, you have to be at least a senior in high school to test for your adult black belt. So my brother Ian and I are the only ones to have our adult black belts. However, my sister got her third degree junior. So it was fun for me because in my middle school, high school years, I transitioned from just a student and into teaching as well. So I had the pleasure and sometimes displeasure of teaching all of my siblings as well. So that could be a time and a half. My sister and I were really close at that time doing those things. I'm blessed. My family and I are all very close. And the arts was just something that kind of helped us like stay in contact. And I still joke with my sister that she needs to come back and train with me. But I will say, like, we always tell kids, like, no, you can show mom and dad at home or the parents at home, the figures at home, your martial arts, but we don't teach our siblings martial arts because if you don't have the experience, you don't have you're not a black belt instructor. So that could get unsafe. And I know sometimes that's hit or miss with whether or not kids actually use their karate at home. For example, in a house full of 7 people who all do martial arts, my siblings and I were constantly tooling on each other. And so I remember there was an instance where Craig and I were on the mat teaching, and I was in high school. My youngest brother, Jack, is in the class. And one of his classmates' parents had pulled Craig aside and was like, hey, like, they're using pretty hands-on with their sibling at home. Like, could you have like a mat chat and like figure that out? And Craig, trying to teach me how to be a better teacher, goes, hey, I'm going to have you do this mat chat, like about how you grew up, you had all these siblings doing karate and you never used your karate at home and all these things. Like, we were never unsafe with it, but like we wrestled, we horseplayed and whatnot. This kid was taking it another level. And so I looked at Craig and I went, yeah, absolutely. I will try and give this mat chat, but you got to pay off the snitch out back because Jack is going to just absolutely lose his mind laughing and completely undermine this. And Craig giggled and went over and went, hey, Jack, I know Noah and you goof off at home, but you need to, he's trying something here. So play along. And it was a good time.
Yeah, the sibling rivalry for what it is can be difficult when you're training. And did you have an instance of you having to train your parents? Because that's another very interesting dynamic.
So I've never had to train my parents. I've been training partners with my parents. Mm-hmm. When we were in 2020, there was a Yoshitsune class that was starting, and my mom loved Yoshitsune. She had an injury, and it kind of made her really nervous to come back. And she has 5 kids, so she's carting them all around the place. Always wanted to get back, but it made her nervous and whatnot. So during COVID, there was an opportunity where you had to have a bubble buddy, and you could only have one partner, and they had to be masked. And we're doing this like combat jujitsu, like wrist locks on each other. And my mom was like, "You're my bubble buddy. I'm coming back." So we have videos of my mom just like hip tossing me onto the ground and like kicking me and like doing this stuff. And so we had a good time. My mom and I have always really loved it, and she's a physical therapist. So she loves how manipulating how the body moves and whatnot has always been a fascination of hers. So being able to do that with her and kind of bring that back was really special and something that I enjoyed.
Mm-hmm. Now, so your mom was able to utilize her knowledge of, the human body and how it works. Your dad working with law enforcement to some degree. So you have two different avenues of people that you can go to talk about a lot of the things that some of us don't have. Have you been able to take advantage of that in a way that others can't? And can
Yeah.
you elaborate on it?
No, absolutely. So like my mom as a physical therapist, so during the day, I'm an elementary school PE teacher. And then in the afternoon, I helped Craig and John run our 2 Karate International locations. And so there have been multiple times where I've had a student whose body moves differently than yours or mine due to either a physical or mental disability, or we have just students who they do something and I'm like, what are you doing? I've never seen somebody do that before. And my mom has been a resource for me. I'm like, okay, like, why would their body move like this? Why is that something that's going on? What is something I can do to help them? And like, especially like adult students who I teach who have hip inflexibility or problems with their back or their knees or their hips. My mom is normally my sounding board for those kind of things. I'm like, what are things that I can do to help them, to give them strength for this? Because that's her profession.
Hmm.
And then my dad, a lot of times when we're getting into the self-defense with the reality martial arts and all of that, I look at my dad and I'm like, what are things that you look for when you are approaching a situation? Like my dad has had multiple situations where he's had to approach and have a conversation with somebody who's presenting as hostile. And with his martial arts background, there was a guy holding a screwdriver with the tip down, kind of like the jabbing motion. And all of his buddies start backing up and start bringing their hands to their waist because that's a dangerous weapon and this guy's hostile. My dad starts walking towards him to close the distance, and all of his buddies are giving him a hard time. And my dad's like, what are you doing? I'm going to try and control the screwdriver. And like, if he's going to swing it, but he's also, my dad's he's a charmer. He's the kind of guy that will charm and disarm somebody and like talk through it if he needs to. And so I often look at him like, okay, if I have somebody do this, is this self-defense or is this taking it a step too far? Are there legal repercussions? What are things that I can be teaching my students that like, okay, I had the situation, I dealt with it. How do they need to state the facts to the police? Like, what are you looking to assess when you go to a scene and take notes and whatnot? So it's cool. I get the physiology side from my mom, and then my dad, I get the real life kind of experience of self-defense and whatnot. So, and he's also he worked for the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, so which is
Mm-hmm.
the oldest federal law enforcement agency, as they'll tell you. It's the big deal for him, but he was the expert in the country in MP5 operatings. So my dad, on top of being a law enforcement guy, is a world-class teacher, an instructor, and would get flown all across the country to teach people how to operate safely. So I also kind of get the teaching tips and the teaching knowledge from my dad as well.
Yeah. Now you mentioned that you're a teacher in your day job.
Yep.
And then in the afternoon, when you're done school, you go to the dojo and you teach as well. What was that transition like from being a student to starting to be a teacher?
So for me, I started teaching or assisting in classes when I was 13, 13, 12, 13. And I was just identified to be an assistant instructor, that guy that goes around tying belts, high-fiving kids, and like just giving praise, like building the atmosphere of the room. Uh, I thought, based off of my own being 13, 14, it's very self-centered, selfish view of the world. I looked at John and Craig and all of these guys that taught me growing up, these guys and girls. They were the best of the best at the school, to steal from you a little bit with best of the best. And they, they, I wanted to be like them. And so I just thought teaching was the next step. And it was like, okay, if I want to be the best black belt possible, if I want to be the best that Karate International has to offer, I need to teach. And I was invited to do so, and I kept going with it. What I found out was that I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And uh, because I grew up being the oldest of like 5 kids, like I kind of knew how to be an older brother. And at that age, that's all I really had to be, is I just needed to be an older brother and a mentor to these kids coming up. And eventually Craig and John showed me how to do things, and I was brought into their teacher program. And the teacher program is kind of like what we had. It's kind of what grew Jeremy and Craig going, oh, we can do like Matic from this. Of like Craig really formalized how he wanted to make teachers, and Jeremy loved that idea, and they kind of took it and went with it. To my knowledge, I could be totally off base, but
that's what I understand as well.
Yeah.
For those listening, Matic is the martial art teacher training certification course that Whistlekick has put together, spearheaded by Craig Wareham and Jeremy.
So I'm kind of like generation alpha when it comes to Matic, I guess, because like I was the guinea pig in that case. So went through it, and one of the cool things that we do at KI is we go into PE programs, local PE programs, to teach kids about martial arts. And the way we do it is not to be like, to an extent, I want kids at my dojo, but we also understand that my teaching style and Craig's teaching style isn't going to be for everybody. Mm-hmm. And so I always ended all of those seminars being like, hey, like, if you liked any of the stuff we did today, go and find martial arts. Because for me, PE was not my thing growing up. I was vastly unathletic and way too competitive for my own good. And martial arts was the thing that I actually took to. That was my sport. Football, baseball, loved them, could not play for the life of me. And as we go through, I'm like, you guys have a lot of awesome places around here. Just find one, try it out, see what happens. And through that, I was in college at the University of New Hampshire and the Durham campus, and was in school to be an environmental lawyer when I left, which, for those of you who know me, my attention span would not have worked at all for being a lawyer or a scientist in that manner. So I graduated 2020 with my degree in environmental conservation, and I was doing these school things. And my friend Katie McNamara, who teaches in Main Street School in Exeter, which is a K-2 school, I asked her for teaching tips because Craig looked at me and goes, hey, Katie's phenomenal at this. Ask her some teaching tips. And I asked her, and she goes, honestly, you're doing everything that they teach you at like a collegiate level. Like, keep refine, and gave me some pointed teaching tips. She went, why don't you go and be a PE teacher? I was like, oh, that'd be kind of cool. And then I graduated 2020, was looking at grad school, looking at trying to get a job in the environmental field. But the dojo and like running a dojo someday was my end goal. And I had a lunch conversation with John, and John went, dude, go be a teacher. Like, be a teacher during the day, run a school in the evening, and then eventually phase from one into the other. I was like, oh, that'd be kind of cool. So I asked Katie if she could like point me to some good PE programs. got me a call with the head of the UNH guy, who was, we call him Steve, Dr. Wright. Dr. Wright. Oh, I could totally be messing that up right now. I only had him for a year. But Steve was the man. And Dr. G over there was awesome too. But I had a phone call with Steve, and he was like, yeah, like, you have a bachelor's from UNH. You'd be a non-traditional. We'd be working towards your master's. But yeah, this was in August. Classes started in 2 weeks. And he was like, yeah, if you send over the paperwork, we'll get you started in like 2 weeks. Do you want to start in 2 weeks? And I went, yeah, I mean, full send it. Let's go. Let's try it. And so I started at UNH in the fall of 2020 in something completely different than I had my bachelor's, which also has been great for me teaching teen students, looking at them going, you don't need to know what you're going to do for the rest of your life at 18 years old. I thought I was going to be a lawyer. And now I teach kids handball and Quidditch to fifth graders. And so I started there, and I give Jeremy and Craig some credit. UNH's phenomenal program. They introduced me to like the teaching style of public school. I already knew kind of how to teach. And so it was just using my teaching style and morphing it into what public education prefers, and kind of like the rules of the road for that venue, which is different than private education. But, you know, you had to know the rules of engagement for that area. And we do peer teaching. So like they gave me like, I'll never forget it with we did a track and field unit, and they teach you, they say, hey, here's the thing, go learn how to teach it. You get 10 minutes. You're going to teach it to your peers, and then we're going to roll from there. And so I picked the triple jump for track and field, which is kind of obscure jumping sport, but one of my buddies was a triple jumper at UNH. So I was like, oh, I can hit him up for some resources. Never did. I just watched a bunch of YouTube on it. And they went, we all pulled up to the UNH track, and he was like, all right, who wants to go first? And I was like, I want to get this over with. Let me at it. I taught for 10 minutes. We all got back, sat down, and Steve sat there and went, okay, well, obviously Noah's taught before. So that's cool. Makes me a whole lot less worried about this now going forward. I didn't realize that Steve was like super worried about having to get me to be a teacher in 2 years. But he was like, oh, I can just like tell this kid like what to do now and he'll be fine. Yeah. So yeah, so that's kind of, UNH was fun. I did a year there, and then you basically interned for a year, and I got to work with Katie, the woman who got me into it. So shout out to Katie McNamara. She's amazing. Who was a New Hampshire PE teacher of the year. And then in the fall, I was teaching with Mark Ruest and Ashlyn Radcliffe in Deerfield, and both of them are New Hampshire PE teachers of the year. So like, I was really blessed because I like learned how to teach from really good people in the martial arts. And then I sought out and got to teach with excellent PE teachers. So, and just become a sponge and learn all of their tips and whatnot. So it's been fun.
Yeah. So definitely fortuitous that you fell in with the right people.
Yeah, 100%.
That it was what you were meant to do. And I find it interesting that you grew up not enjoying PE.
Oh yeah.
And ended up, teaching it. I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about what it was like as a student, but going into schools with your teachers, working with their PE programs, and how that may have translated into your actually becoming a PE teacher as well. Did that have any bearing at all?
So it was cool. I got to go, like you said, I got to go to all of my different schools that I went to growing up and teach there. And I want to say this correctly. These people were not the reason why I wasn't good at PE or why I didn't enjoy PE. All of the reasons why I didn't like PE was me. And I think that's something that a lot of new teachers don't know is and have to learn pretty quickly is that it is not you. Like 9 times out of 10, if a kid is having a bad day, that's just that. Like, it's not anything to do with you. You can't take it personal and just move on and do your best for them in that given moment. And I was just a highly emotional, competitive kid who did not know how to express his emotions. And so PE was not a good place for me because I was super unathletic, not coordinated, but was a perfectionist with high anxiety who wanted to be the best. And I couldn't. And so at that point in time, because my mentality was so wrong about everything at that point in my life. And so going back and teaching with these people, I was like, oh, they're human beings and they're really cool and I really enjoy them. And so getting that kind of like different view on things was really nice. And also getting to, what's the word with it? Getting to look at all of these kids and be like, hey, listen, I've been in your shoes and this is what I'm doing now. It's always kind of fun too. Like, I was here when, and they're all like, whoa, you're really old. I had a kid look at me the other day and was like, yeah, they were like in the 19s. I was like, let's simmer down. Like, the 19s were not that long ago. And so, but it's all good. But yeah, no, it's fun going back and seeing them. And I will actually like go and visit them when it's karate week. Like, I know Craig has an event or something that he has to go, and I actually get to go. I'm taking a personal day and going and teaching karate at Main Street. So I get to go and hang out with Katie again and like do all those things, which will be fun.
Now, you're teaching PE during the school day, during the day, and then you're at the school at night, the dojo at night. What similarities do you see between both? Like, how much of your martial arts do you use in your PE teaching? And how much have you learned from being a PE teacher that you have been able to take into the dojo?
It's funny. Like, when it comes to like teaching, I teach like a karate teacher at the dojo at public school. Like, I've always had a firm belief that what we teach is not, it is the skills. Like I'm teaching punches, kicks, grappling, all of that. But at the end of the day, what a martial arts program to me is life skills. You're teaching kids how to be a good person and teaching them goal setting, discipline, those kind of things. And discipline, I feel like, is one of those words that is like, oh, like you discipline the kid. I'm like, no. I'm teaching them how to, when motivation is not there, still do the things that they need to do, even though they don't want to do it. Like, that's a life skill that most adults are still working on, myself included. And so I guess that philosophy has come into the gym, where I've even looked at 5th graders when they're having a tough day in the class. And I'm like, listen, going to middle school next year, I do not care if you know how to kick a ball. Like, some of you are going to be excellent at it. I'm fully aware that some of you are not. I need you to be able to be a good person, to work well with each other, because I can teach you how to kick a ball when you're 80. I can teach you how to kick a ball when you're 20 or you're 15. If you are able to be a good learner and a good person that works well with other people, you are going to take that with you for the rest of your life. And that's always the philosophy I've taken into my classes in the gym. Vice versa, going from the gym to the dojo, routines I found are extremely important. I was a little bit more freeform as a teacher at the dojo, whereas I know, especially kids coming from a trauma background or a student that falls on the autism spectrum, these students love a consistent routine. Of course, I'm going to push it because life is never going to be routine organized all the time. There are going to be times I'm going to throw a wrench into things and teach you how to get through it. But if I can set up a routine in a way where these students are finding success, getting into the door, and then feeling safe and comfortable, that's something I can do. And with that too, like teaching in PE, I've learned about how to read IEPs, or individualized education plans, and some of the philosophies behind some of like the education law of IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. Everybody has to have PE, regardless of ability, in a school, in a public school. And with that being said, it needs to be in the least restrictive environment. So, and for that, it depends on who you are. So like there are kids where I can throw into a general PE class, they're going to thrive. There are some kids that are not. And so with that, I've had to make different choices for my class. So my school, before I got there, there wasn't an adapted physical education class. There is one now, where I basically, for all of my students who qualify, I give them a preview of what we're doing this week and help pre-teach them some of the skills before they go into the actual class. And because of that, and then there are also kids that like I will teach one-on-one before they get to my class and be like, okay, here's what's going to happen. If we feel ourselves getting frustrated, what is a choice or an option that we can take? And they're like, oh, I can like go sit in your office door and look at the Dungeons and Dragons books until I'm ready. And I'm like, perfect, do that. And then come back to me and we'll get you back in. Some days they're going to be able to get back in. Some days they're not. And that's okay. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Mm-hmm. But at the dojo, what that's turned into is I now have an adaptive martial arts class that I have for adult students that are young adult students that fall somewhere on the spectrum. And it's just me and them and maybe one or two other instructors. And it's a blast. It's my favorite class of the week. And they get to have a safe space where they can do martial arts and work towards black belt, because everybody should have the opportunity to earn a black belt. And right now, my goal is we have the Karate International core curriculum, and I'm adapting that. And because this is the first time we're doing that, I'm like, no, this needs to be repeatable. Like, I can't just do this and then when I die or when I leave or when something goes, like, this is something that needs to happen. So I need to start the roadmap so that way, and then start teaching the next guy up in order for them to be able to do that. So that's something Craig and I are currently working on, is making that curriculum what it look like for that student to get to their black belt, and what's a way that I, as their instructor, can get them there. And then, yeah, sorry, brain.
That's okay. No, that's great. Tangents are what this channel is all about.
Yeah. And so, like, for example, too, at the dojo, least restrictive environment, I have some students that start with me private lessons, one-on-one. Mm-hmm. I've had a student that started with me in private lessons, one-on-one for about 2 years, who now he's like a purple blue belt and is in the general class and is being taught by 16, 17-year-old teachers, and he's doing great. And I'm talking to mom, and not only is this kid doing this, they're also participating in cross country at their school. Like, that's the thing with like the least restrictive environment. That's a flexible term. Like, they start off here. My end goal for some is to grow them into the general population class. Some that's not going to happen, and that's okay. But it's meeting students where they're at and making sure that, again, everybody deserves to do martial arts, because it changed my life. I'm pretty sure from our conversations that it's probably changed yours too.
Sure.
And like I think it needs to be accessible to everybody. And so we're working, one of my goals is making sure that A, it is accessible to everybody, and B, making sure that I have the next generation coming up that is confident with their tools in order to make that happen. And we'll see. It's going to be a lot of work, but it's important work, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Now, so you started teaching at the PE program, and you created an adaptive PE program. You were
yep.
teaching at the karate school. You created this adaptive karate program. What do you think made it such a important part of your journey and of your giving back that you create these programs? Like, what was it? Was there something that said, just I have to do this?
So I will say this, the dojo in Exeter had a relationship with Easter Seals, New Hampshire. And so my first time teaching adults with various mental, emotional, physical disabilities, or just their bodies move differently than yours or mine, was in Exeter. And Craig had been teaching this class, and it's a half an hour class. There's about 20 adults in there. And Craig looked at me and goes, "All right, you're 20. Go give it a shot." And yeah, I'd watched him teach it twice, and he was like, "Do it. Just roll with it." And like with those classes, you just have to be flexible. And so Craig had shown me kind of like the start. And I think the biggest barrier to people a lot of the time is understanding. And people didn't just, like, for me, I was nervous that I was going to say the wrong thing or not be the right person for the job. And in reality, I just needed to be there and show that I cared. And I got in, showed that I cared, and it was a blast. And the reason why I personally think that this has been such a big thing for me is martial arts was my thing. I was not an athlete, but I wanted to be one. I wanted to have these abilities. And in PE growing up, I felt like I wasn't being shown like these things. And I just wasn't in a place to hear it at the time. And teaching those skills and teaching those opportunities to everybody and giving that education to everybody is important, because when I was a kid, I felt like I was excluded. Upon further reflection and years of therapy, I was not excluded. I was excluding myself because I was nervous. But I now make it an effort in those classes of finding those kids that feel like they don't belong and being like, no, you belong, and you belong right here with all the rest of us. And it's going to be great. Sometimes this is going to be better than others, but that's all right. Yeah. Sorry, my train went off for a second.
That's quite all right. That's good.
Yeah.
Now, I also know that and you're teaching early education, PE.
Third, fourth, and fifth.
Yeah. And there tends to be a lot of, I don't want to generalize, but there tends to be a lot of games, right?
Yeah.
And obviously we're talking organized games like basketball and soccer and like volleyball, things like that. But especially at the earlier age, there tends to also be just a lot of games. And in a lot of kids' classes for martial arts, there tends to be not an entire class of games, but often there are some games. What correlations have you been able to take back and forth from those two roads?
So, like, for example, like at the dojo, one of the big things in PE is we don't make fitness a punishment. So like I don't want like my fifth grader to be like, oh, oh, like I have to do push-ups. Like push-ups are awful. And it's like, no. We get to do push-ups.
Hmm.
Push-ups make you stronger. Like that's awesome. And so one of the things that I've taken from like PE to martial arts is like, oh, like if you are not doing the expectations, if you're not following our behavior, you will not be invited to play in the game at the end of class. Like that's the natural consequences. If you can't follow our group expectations, that's just how it rolls. Like if you're choosing not to be a part of the group, you won't be able to participate in the fun part of class,
Mm-hmm.
the quote unquote fun part. And then in school, part of that is just like holding those expectations. Like at the dojo, like I feel like we try and explain away some things occasionally, but holding those firm boundaries, especially for the kids, like there are kids that I understand where you're coming from. I understand why your behavior is the way that it is. And I'll unpack that with them and their case managers and the guidance counselors. But at the same time, I'm like, I get it, but we can't do that. Like you're going to hurt somebody or you're going to hurt yourself. And like, I remember even like dojo, just unpacking it during a game with a kid of like, I was like, why are you sitting out? He's like, 'cause I'm mad. I'm like, no, I don't care if you're mad. You can play angry all you want. You cannot make other people uncomfortable, and you can't put yourself or others in danger. And he went, wait, I can be mad? I'm like, yeah, I play mad all the time. But I make sure that people know that they're going to be safe with me, and I'm going to be safe to myself. And he looked at me and went, oh, okay. Wait, so I can like be mad, but be in control of my body? I'm like, yes. Everybody does that. Yeah, that's normal. That's fine. Like being mad is not a bad thing. So like with games, and I know like games are a way to navigate social problems. Most of my teaching is not, I set up the game, I teach them the skills, and I'll provide feedback to help with the skills. But I find most of the feedback that I'm having to give is, well, yeah, no, the tone, the advice you gave them was great. The tone you used made them think that they were mad at you. So maybe use a different tone. They're like, what's tone? And so I stole it from my buddy Mark, one of my favorite, Mark Ruest in Deerfield. He looked at a bunch of 7th and 8th graders and was like, do you guys know what tone is? They're like, no. He's like, Noah, come here. And he's like, Noah, I love you, man. You're the best ever. And he starts like yelling at me. I'm like, whoa. And they're like, did it sound like I was giving Mr. Dever like a bunch of love and compliments? And they're like, no. It sounded like you were really mad at him. And he goes, so what I was saying did not matter because of how I was saying it. And they were like, oh. He's like, that's tone. So we have that conversation annually in the gym. We have it at the dojo. Like games, PE, and martial arts is all life skills. It's teaching kids how to cooperate and be respectful and empathetic towards each other. And that truly is what I feel like I teach. And that's the philosophy John and Craig instilled in me, and Mark and Katie showed me. And then at UNH, they just showed me that's for everybody. So like, yeah, it's all about being a good person, and getting your endorphins up while you're doing it normally helps. So, yeah.
So you have talked a lot about teaching children.
Yeah.
Whether it's in PE or whether it's at the dojo. Do you prefer to teach kids over adults?
I wouldn't. So I have more experience teaching kids than I do adults. I've only been teaching adults consistently for about 2 years now, and I teach them at the Barrington School. So I have a class there, and the big thing that I was always told is like, Craig looked at me in the adult class and I loved it. So I kind of took the philosophy of like, adults go through enough. on their day-to-day basis. Like I'm 26 now. I live with my girlfriend. I have 2 jobs. I am off my parents' insurance now. Like I'm paying for all this stuff out of pocket now, or I'm on my own insurance. But like adults go through a lot on their day to day. They do not need a grown man standing in the middle of the room going, "No, do it again." Blah. And some days they do, but that's maybe like once a year for me.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I'm just providing a space for them to learn skills and decompress. Like, and yes, they're learning a curriculum. Yes, there's expectations, there's rank, they have to be able to push through these things. But 95% of the time, I'm providing a community for them to join rather than, because at the end of the day, the oldest student that I've had is 83. What life skill am I teaching an 83-year-old? Like, I am 26 years old. Like, it's all good. Like, but I'm providing them a community and a space, and I'm the keeper of that community. And so my responsibility is making sure that it is positive and inclusive to everybody. Mm-hmm. And so it's a different role.
Yeah.
So like, yes, I enjoy teaching kids because I get to be that mentor, older brother, teach them the life skills kind of vibe. But I do enjoy teaching adults because it's like, no, this is our place that we've built together, and we all get to just kind of blow off steam and learn. So
yeah. So as you were talking, from the very beginning, the word that I kept hearing in my head, and you just mentioned it, was mentoring. Like you clearly were mentored as a child by, you've mentioned Craig and John.
Yeah.
And it resonated so well with you that you took it upon yourself that this is an important thing for you, that you are mentoring. You're not just going in and teaching a PE class. You are mentoring. You're taking it to the next step. And I think that's amazing. And I think it's important for people listening to recognize that you have a huge impact on your students. If Craig and John were very different people, you would have turned out very differently.
100%. Yeah. And that's why, like, I've always gone back to, and this is something like, as I've gotten older and I've matured slightly, they tell me that I have a fully developed frontal lobe now. I'm kind of hoping I still got some time, but we'll see. But like, it's not the style. Like I do Kempo karate, but in reality, John is a referee that's reffed in the UFC. So I grew up thinking wrestling, BJJ, combat jiu-jitsu, American kickboxing, all that stuff was Kempo. It didn't matter what style I was doing. I was learning from John. And at the end of the day, I don't think it's the style that matters, because quite frankly, I am not a kicker. I'm 5'8" on a good day. I'm 200 pounds. Like me kicking, getting my leg above my head is not going to happen. I'm much more of a wrestler build, but I grew up in a striking art because I felt valued and heard and loved by John and Craig. And I don't think it's the style. I think it's the instructor. So that's why Craig keeps looking at me and going, people don't leave a place where they feel valued and loved. And so if we just go out there and tell people that we love them, we value them, and we want to help them, life's going to be good, man. And we just got to keep doing that, because that's what matters most to us. So.
And what's next for you? What in your journey, what's next?
Good golly. There's a lot. There's a lot of things. We'll see. I definitely running dojos, eventually owning my own. That is a big goal. I've also toyed around with the idea of, if I go and I open up a school, I want to get it going, running it, and then if the opportunity presents itself, I would love to go and get a PhD in education. I think actually doing the research on some of that stuff. I love English. My brain works way too much like a scientist, but I love, like, English class was my favorite. So I feel very dichotomy, like two different people living in my own brain. My buddy Drake would say it's the Gemini in me, but we'll see. But I would love to go and, like, teach PE teachers how to be teachers as well. Anywhere I go, I'm probably going to end up teaching, because it's just, at this point, it's what I'm, as John would put it, it's my God-given talent. It's what I was called on this planet to do, and I've been blessed with it. Sometimes it doesn't feel like a blessing, but you know what? That's with everything. And we'll see. So owning my own school, carrying on that KI tradition, because it changed my life, and I think it can do a lot for others too. And then maybe being a martial artist with a PhD in education would be kind of cool. You know, the first MATIC graduate to get his PhD in education come back and help make level 42 or something. So, who knows? But
that would be great. So we'll start to wind it down here, and I'll kick it back to you in just a second to close us out and leave the audience with something. But I just want to remind the audience of all the stuff that we do here at Whistlekick. I failed to mention, I think, at the beginning, that if you are a school owner, you can go to whistlekick.com and find out information on joining Whistlekick Alliance, which is our program just for school owners to help them better what they do, or purchase something from our store using the code podcast15, and then joining Patreon/Whistlekick, patreon.com/Whistlekick, to help support what it is that we do to help us connect, educate, and entertain traditional martial artists of the world in our goal to have everyone in the world train martial arts for 6 months. So before we close out, Noah, how can people reach you if they are interested in what it is you're doing, especially with your PE program, and how can people connect with you?
Yeah, probably the easiest way to reach me would be my karate email. So that'd be Noah, Noah, at Kimac, so KIMACNH.com. That's my work email. Definitely hit me up there. Facebook, I'm Noah Dever. But yeah, no, those are probably the two places that I'm always happy to help, because quite honestly, this is how we grow the arts. I've grown up with, Craig has always told me, we're one generation away from the martial arts dying. And so it's our responsibility to keep it going. So if there's any way I can help you and the listeners, anybody, just hit me up. I'm more than happy to help.
Cool. And what do you want to leave the audience with? What anything you want them to take away from our talk today?
That's a great question.
I only try and ask the great ones.
Martial arts is for everybody. It might not be from you if you're a teacher, and that's okay. But everybody can benefit from martial arts. We just need to be creative. Some people we're going to need to be more creative than others, and that's okay. But it's our responsibility as teachers and educators to make that happen. And so help each other, love each other, and we'll make it work.